Hello and welcome everyone. Now it's 9 o'clock here in local time in Denmark, and we will start the webcast. So today's webcast is about the AnyBody modeling system in general. It will be a tour and overview of the new version 7.0 release. So I'll have to get my mouse working here. Yeah. My name is Morten. I'm an R&D engineer here at AnyBody Technology. And with me today I have Anand, who's a senior consultant. And we'll guide you through this webcast. First, I will give you a general introduction to the modeling system and talk about some of the new UI features we have. Then Anand will give you a live demo of the system based on the new MoCap model that we have. Afterwards, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the minor features in this release and our future vision and work here at AnyBody. So what you can expect for the rest of the year. And in the end, we'll do a questions and answers session. But first, a little introduction to what the AnyBody modeling system is. The AnyBody modeling system is a piece of software for biomechanical analysis of musculoskeletal models. It's basically two parts when you talk about AnyBody. We have the general software system where you can develop your models in, and then we have a big repository of models. These are basically text files which you can load in the AnyBody modeling system. They represent the different models, the body parts, and a lot of applications of how to use the models. The AnyBody modeling system is used in a wide variety of applications, from product design and optimization to economic analysis, surgical planning and outcome evaluation. You can use the output of AnyBody as boundary conditions for your final element analysis. And AnyBody is also heavily used within movement analysis. A typical workflow when you work with the AnyBody modeling system would be something like this. You might have motion, recorded motion from your labs, or forces. This could be from a MoCap experiment. And you might combine that with your own body models or body models which you take from our body model repository. And then you might also have some environment that you want to test out. This could be, as in this example, an exoskeleton. And you combine all of these things into a model in the AnyBody modeling system. And then you run the analysis on that model and the simulations. And the output would be the internal body loads in the human model. It could be muscle forces or joint forces. Those things you may output and use in other tools. It could be final element analysis and that kind of thing. And finally, you could close the loop completely and do design optimization to optimize your product. So let's talk about what's new in the AnyBody modeling system. So as I explained before, there are basically two parts to the AnyBody modeling system. The modeling system itself and the models. And the update here with version 7 is all about the modeling system. So there's no updates to the model at this point. You can find the new version by going to our website. If you go in there, you might need to log in, but you can click the download buttons in there, and this will take you to a resource page where you can find a different kind of material. And in there, you click the customer downloads button, and then you can find the new modeling system or download it directly. So what's new in the modeling system? The major changes in version 7 are mostly about user interface. There's a completely new framework for the user interface, and we have a new revamped replay system that allows completely free replay of your models. And Ant will show this in a minute or two. There's also a lot of minor changes to the modeling system. We have a new system for handling default drawings when you create objects which, for example, if you haven't added a bone to. We also have some new AnyScript functions in the system. We have some small features for Gapfilling, C3D files, or marker trajectories. And there is also more tweaks and fixes in the release. But to see this, I encourage you to take a look at the release notes. So to find the release notes, you just click the Help button within the system and select the Release Notes option. And there you have a complete overview of all the different features that is in the new modeling system. Before we talk about the new user interface, let's just familiarize ourselves with how the old user interface system worked so that you can relate the two. In the old system, you had this area here, which I marked, which were the model trees. There were a number of tabs here on the left side, which you could change to show different kinds of trees. Then you had an information window, which showed you information about the things you selected in the model tree. At the bottom, you have the output windows, where you could see output of what is running and what is happening when you load models. And finally, everything else in the old system was basically floating windows. This could be the model view window, chart views, editor, code that you had open. All of these things were floating windows that tend to overlap. So let's take a look at the new user interface. This is what you see here on the right side of the screen. It looks familiar. Again, you have the model trees here, and you have the information output window. That has been updated quite substantially to show information in a nicer way. And then we have the output windows. So for those of you who worked a lot with the AnyBody modeling system before, this is also very familiar. The remaining part are the editor windows and the model view and chart view windows. And these are in the main area here of the user interface. But unlike the old system, things here are not just free floating. Every window is docked in with tabs and such. You can undock these things and move them around and recustomize them. But Anand will show that as well in a few minutes. So to sum up, the new user interface features are basically a new look and feel, along with some other things. For example, custom window layouts. We can move the windows around as we want. We have a tabbed editor for working with files. We have a new way to do execute operations to make it easier to run the analysis that you need. We have some new features for navigating the model tree and sorting the model trees. And we have a new replay functionality as well. But I think I will give the word now to Anand, who will do the live demo of the system. So Anand, can you hear me? And I'll make you the presenter.
Yes, Morten. Thank you for that quick introduction. I hope all of you can see my screen right now. This is what you guys should typically see upon starting up version 7.0 for the first time. This big dialog box that appears in the middle of your screen is an AnyBody assistant, which contains some resources to help you get started. And for those of you who are familiar with past versions of this assistant would immediately notice that this is new. So we've just created a quick 6-minute or so video tour which takes you over all the basic concepts you need to do some basic modeling and simulations with the software. So when I close the assistant, this brings us to the GUI or the graphical user interface, which Morten has been describing so far. But before we go into what's what in this interface and also what's new, let us take a look at the model that we will be working with today. So this will be a motion capture model, and in fact, it's a new and it's a far more user-friendly version of the motion capture model compared to what we have right now in the software. But the model is still in, although the model has been developed, it's in what we call a beta stage, which means that it's yet to be formally incorporated into the AnyBody modeling system. So it's still in some sort of, it's in a final testing phase, so to speak. But you can still download this model right away. You need to go to AnyScript.org, and it's fine if you don't catch these details right now because I think Morten will be mentioning them again at the end. So if you go to AnyScript.org and if you then click on repositories, so you'll find this model in the middle, the one called MoCap. So this is the new version of the motion capture model that we will be working with. And for the sake of this webcast, we've actually upgraded it even further, and we now have an additional example in there, which shows you how to use a ground reaction force prediction along with your motion capture data, which essentially helps you to, so let's say you have marker data, but you do not have force plate data. This actually helps you predict the ground reaction forces and still enable you to run in inverse dynamic simulation and calculate muscle forces. So with that, let us go back to the software. Now, since I've already downloaded this onto my computer, I'm just going to click File and say Open. Now, when you download the AnyMoCap model, this is what you would typically see. The AnyMoCap folder is what you would be downloading. And you just need to go into Examples, and the very first one, which says GRF prediction. This is the model that we will be working with today. So if I open this folder, there is a main AnyScript file, which I open up. And those of you who have worked with the current version of the MoCap model or the old version of the MoCap model would immediately notice a huge change, because we've the design goal behind creating this new model was to actually make life a lot simpler for our users. So now, if you're just running a simple MoCap simulation, you just need to set some trial, subject, and lab specific data in these 3 files, and you're good to go, unless you want to do something very specialized and actually change the way the model works. So unless you want to do that, you don't need to be worried about the technical innards of this particular MoCap model. I won't go into the details of what exactly these files contain and how they're structured, because we actually are planning a standalone webcast to deal with this. So for now, let us go ahead and load this model into the software. And for this, you can click the Load button on the top in the toolbar. So some of the buttons in this toolbar are new as well, or they look new, but I think they've been designed to be fairly self-explanatory. So those of you who our frequent users can figure their way around. So when I hit load, it takes a couple of seconds to fully load the model, and you can track the progress of the loading process in this message window at the bottom. And the model is fully loaded when we see the model appear in the model view, which currently you can see the black square on the right. So the model should momentarily appear over there. There you go. And I'm going to use the buttons in the model view toolbar up here to actually just change the view a little bit. Now, with regards to, Morten did mention that we've made life a little easier by taking away the floating windows. So this means now that the AnyScript editor and the model view are now appear in docked windows, which you can which the default layout might be something that you find comfortable to work with, or let's say you want to customize it. This is fairly easy as well. So I can, for example, just click on the model view bar, on the model view Windows title bar, and just drag it out, and then use these buttons that appear in the middle of my screen to actually reposition the window. And I can then just take it back again. If you are used to the old style of floating windows, and if you really want to go back to that, you can just drag it and drop. So which means you now have the model view as a floating window. And if you want to send it back to its docking position, you just need to double click on the orange title bar. So this, while the model view gives us a visual representation of the model, we have the model tree on the left, which again, it represents exactly the same model, but it's a schematic of sorts, which means that it represents the model components in a folder and subfolder structure. So we have a few new tools to help you navigate the model tree. So let's say, for example, I just open up a few sub branches over here, and I first click on this object that says main. I'm then going to click on human model, and then I'm going to click on parameter identification. Now, I can use these 2 buttons on the top left to actually cycle through these choices that are really made. So they sort of work similarly, or the way they work is similar to the way your forward and backward buttons work in your internet browser. So if I were to just click this back button, you can see that it cycles through those changes or through those clicks in reverse order, and this goes forward. So while this might seem completely unnecessary for the level of the model tree that we are at right now, the model tree is actually extremely vast, and when you really get your hands dirty with trying to do some complex simulations with the model, you may want to dive into the depths of the model tree, and that's where these tools would come in really handy. So with that done, we are now ready to run some simulations on this model. Now we call simulations operations in AnyBody, and you can find an operations tab right next to the model tree tab on the left side of your screen. So if I click on operations, the classic way or the standard way of running these operations in AnyBody so far had been to choose one of these two operations that appear over here. So these operations, of course, they differ based on the type of on the specific model file that you're trying to run. In this case, since we have a motion capture model, we see that we have two primary operations. The first operation is called parameter identification, and this is sort of an auto-scaling algorithm which uses your motion capture data to scale your the human subject, or to scale the human model according to the actual person's dimensions. And then you have a second operation down here, which is called run analysis. And this is the operation which actually runs the inverse dynamic inverse dynamics on the motion capture data and calculates the muscle forces. And in this particular case, also predicts the ground reaction forces. So the classic way of running these simulations in AnyBody would have been to click on an operation and then hit the run button up here. Now this still works in version 7.0, but we've made life a little more simpler by giving you an operations drop-down menu at the very top. So if I were to expand this menu, you can see the same two operations listed over here. Now these are the primary operations, as I mentioned, and there are many other operations that are sort of hidden away inside the model, which a typical user would not want to bother with. But if you're an advanced user and you really want to do something very specific, you can ask it to show all operations and then choose the one that you wish to run. But for now, let us just say that we are content with running the standard parameter identification. I select this operation from the drop-down menu and then click on the run operation button, which is the play button over here. Now, once I do that, you can see that the model starts moving now in the model view window, which means that the simulation has begun. And this is going to take a few minutes to run. So let's not bother to wait for the entire thing to finish. I have actually opened here a second instance of AnyBody, where you can see that I've already run parameter identification and inverse dynamics. So this just speeds up our demo a little bit, in fact, quite a bit. You can see that inverse dynamics has been run because the message window says so. And but now we may want to actually replay the results and sort of see what's exactly going on in as the model moves. So for this, we have the new replay toolbar, which is also something that Morten mentioned earlier. So I can use the play button in the replay toolbar to replay the entire motion. So you can see now in the model view that the guy started walking, and you can see the blue lines under his feet. If I were to just zoom in a little more. So the blue lines under his feet are actually the predicted ground reaction forces. And you can even see if you just look closely, you can see the green sphere under the feet as well, which is the motion of the center of pressure as the person progresses through the gait cycle. So this is just a replay of the inverse dynamics results. If I wanted to do something, if I could alternatively have used the slider to manually control whether the replay goes backwards or forwards or go to a specific frame of my motion. So on that note, I think I've given you a quick overview of the new 7.1, or sorry, the 7.0 version. And I would also encourage all of you to go and download the new AnyMoCap model, try it out. I know a lot of people have been requesting us for a MoCap model which has this ground reaction force prediction example. So go ahead, try it out. And since this is still in the beta phase, we would really appreciate that you report any issues or errors that you come across to us so that we can fix them before we actually put it into the final or before we finally incorporate it into the software. So on that note, let me give the word back to Morten, who will tell us a little more about what's new and also give us a sneak peek into the future vision for the software. Are you in, Morten?
I am. Thank you very much, Anand, for the nice presentation. So I think I will go on and tell you a little bit about some of the minor features that Anand didn't mention. So one of the minor features are some new AnyScript functions. We have some new AnyScript convenience functions for creating and initializing arrays. We have a zeros function for example, that creates arrays of zeros, a function that creates arrays of ones, a function that creates identity matrices, a function called linspace that creates equispaced arrays, and a function called repmat, which can replicate arrays. So for example, in this case here, the identity function that you see above has been repeated twice. You could also use repmat for other kinds of things. For example, if you want to set something, some settings in AnyBody requires other kind of types. For example, this here, we have this auth value here, which has been repeated 10 times to create an array of auth values. And some objects in AnyBody require these kind of settings as arrays. So this is practical for this kind of thing. All of these arrays are probably very familiar to people who have worked with MATLAB or similar software. They're at least named similarly. We also have a function for gap-filling C3D trajectories. So if you ever worked with MoCap data, you know that markers tend to drop out. And in AnyBody, you can actually work with this kind of data. So AnyBody can ignore the markers in the areas where, in the periods where they drop out. And the way that AnyBody does that is that a C3D file, a MoCap file, has this kind of variable called a residual variable for each marker. And when that residual variable is basically a measure of how well the marker can, the cameras can see the marker. But if the residual values go to -1, that's an indication that the marker is out of view. So AnyBody uses that to ignore AnyBody can use that to ignore the marker when it goes out of view. If we look down at the bottom graph down here, we see the actual marker position. So as the marker goes out of view, the data in the C3D file just has like 0.0.0 for the marker position. The problem with all of this until now has been that as soon as you apply a filter, a low-pass filter to your marker data, which is necessary, then we have these kind of edge effects here, as I tried to mark on the graph. This means that even though AnyBody is ignoring the data in the area where it's dropped out, we still have some weird marker movement outside that area. And that has been a problem. But we have this new feature here called Gapfill using residuals. If you set this to on, what it will do is that it will basically do a linear gap filling of the data in those areas where the markers have dropped out. So that is what you can see down here for the same marker. So you see it drops out, and then there's just a linear area where the marker doesn't move, and then it comes back in again. So the gap filling here is not meant to be used as normal gap filling, or the kind of gap filling you would do in your MoCap software. But it is something that is quite useful because now we can actually apply a low-pass filter to the data without getting those edge effects. And here I've also applied a low-pass filter, and you can see those two lines, they are totally identical. So we don't have this problem. So this is a useful feature if you are working with MoCap data and you have a lot of dropouts in your data. Finally, let's talk about what you can expect from us here in 2017 or the coming year. First of all, we plan to release a new model repository. We are very much looking forward to that. And we plan to include some of these things in the repository, for example, a new lower limb model. We also hope that we can include a new thoracic model in it. It's under heavy development. We hope we can include our updated lumbar spine and a new pelvis. And we also have a number of new applications to show off. So we are very much looking forward to releasing this after the summer holiday. There's also this new MoCap framework that Anand has told you about. And that you can actually get right now by going to this link that we have here on the screen. So I encourage you to check that out and report back any issues that you find so we can make it better. Finally, we're going to talk about a little bit about what our future vision for the AnyBody modeling system is. Basically, the new user interface here is something that we think of as the foundation for improving the usability of AnyBody. It's a foundation where we can add new features that will make it easier for the user to work with the models. We really basically want to have more features so users don't have to always interact directly with the script. And an example of one of these things is a plugin for AnyBody that we are working on. And I'm going to give you an example of that. This is a small plugin for configuring your model. So at the moment when you're configuring your model, you're basically setting a lot of switch statements in the AnyScript. And that can be a little bit confusing, and it requires that you actually look in the documentation to see which options you have available. But we plan to do a plugin like this, and I'm just going to start it now so you can see it. So here it's starting up. I'm just going to select one of the files here where I have my my configuration in. And this plugin here, it gives me an interface, a user interface to configure the model. So just by clicking the different buttons here, I can reconfigure the model with different body parts. I can change for example here I changed to the detailed hand model. There's a specific tab for the leg where you can configure or turn off muscles or change the muscle type. Similar one for the arms. You can configure the arm model, set the type of muscle, turn on rhythms and stuff. And for trunk, you have many options for setting muscles on different parts of it, setting ligament stiffnesses, and all these kind of things that are still possible in the script, but require that you do some searching to figure out which options you have available. Using a plugin like this immediately gives you an impression of what options you have available. And after you have your configuration, all you need to do is apply, and the script behind really updates. So this is the kind of vision that we have, and we hope to make many more of these kind of plugins. For example, also a plugin for the MoCap model that you saw before. So we look forward to share many more of these things with you in the future. We're also hoping to make a generic system so anyone can make these plugins for anybody. That will make the system much more flexible. And this brings us to the end here. I will encourage you to check out our YouTube channel for previous webcasts. You can also go to our company page to find events, dates, and on the company webpage we also have a publication list, which is really useful if you want to find similar papers in the area that you are working. And finally, Anand mentioned this homepage here, community page called AnyScript.org, where you can find link to the forum, our wiki site, and also the repositories where you can download this AnyMoCap model. If you want to meet us at any of these events, for example, ESB or ISB in Australia, please send us an email on sales@anybodytech.com.